Today we're going to continue talking about central idea and supporting details. So remember, central idea, I can also say this is my main idea. We're going to look for clues. We're going to use the headings, the visuals, first and last sentence, and repeated words to find my main idea. And then we're going to find our evidence, the details in the story or in the paragraphs, to figure out what our main idea is. Okay, this is the graphic organizer we're going to use. Today we're going to read Lonely and Boring and Scorching Heat. So let's remember that our genre is literary nonfiction, because when we read the story we go back and forth between learning information like a nonfiction text, and then we start to hear a story like a fiction text. And so we just go back and forth between those two throughout the entire article. So we are going to read Lonely and Boring and be thinking about our main idea. What is this mostly about? So while I'm reading, if this is my heading, this could be what the main idea is about. Someone's lonely and something is boring. Because I can use my headings and repeated words to come up with the main idea. Around 11:30, Albert finished eating lunch with his brother and headed back to work. Albert was a trapper. That's important to know. What is a trapper? He sat by the door and only opened it to let miners and mules pass. Well, now it tells me what a trapper is. The door was part of the mine's ventilation system. This kept fresh air flowing where people were working. It also helped stop the buildup of dangerous gases. A trapper's job was important but boring. So here, a trapper's job was important but boring. That boring connects to this boring in the heading. Okay, so this must be about his job, Albert's job. So it's about Albert, his job is boring. That's what I know so far. Imagine sitting alone in the dark all day, just opening and closing the door. Sometimes you might not see a person for hours, but you couldn't fall asleep. Say a mule team came speeding along. If you didn't open the door, it could crash. The mules, the driver, and maybe even you would be crushed. What was Albert thinking about as he guarded the door? Was he looking forward to the next day? It would be Sunday, his only day off. Whatever his thoughts were, they would soon disappear. Disaster was coming. So this section is titled Lonely and Boring. So boring, that's what his job was boring. And lonely, sometimes you might not see a person for hours. Okay? So that tells me that he was lonely. He sat there by himself for a long time, just closing and opening the door. So I have some evidence here that connects to my heading. So my heading gave me clues about what the main idea of this section of the text is about. So it's about Albert's job, and his job was boring and lonely. So I'm going to go back to my graphic organizer, and we're going to fill in our main idea. So we could either say many jobs, or we could say Albert's job. And since it's mostly about Albert, we're going to say that Albert's job. Albert's job was lonely and boring. Okay, so now what are my pieces of evidence? So we could say Albert's job was a trapper in the coal mine. Albert's job was a trapper in the coal mine, and we're going to add in here that he didn't see people for hours, because that's going to tell us that it was definitely lonely and it was probably boring. And so for the boring part, we could add a detail about what he was, being a trapper. We know what he did, so that kind of takes care of the boring. Albert's job was a trapper in the coal mine, and didn't see people for hours. Okay, so there's one supporting detail. And then we could also maybe say that it was boring. He couldn't even sleep if you didn't open the door, but you couldn't fall asleep. Samuel team came speeding along, so you have to open the door. If you didn't open it, they would crash. So we're going to do a little arrow. Boring, but couldn't. Boring, but couldn't sleep. But couldn't sleep. Because others could get hurt. Okay, so I filled in my organizer. Now we're going to read the next section. Scorching heat. I'm thinking about the main idea. So if this is my heading, or you could say subtitle, I'm going to be thinking what in this text connects to scorching heat, because this is a clue to tell me what the main idea is about this section of the text, these paragraphs. Not long after lunch, Albert opened the door for a car filled with hay, food for the mules. A few moments later, another miner came running up to Albert. Fire, he shouted. Somehow, oil from a lamp had dripped onto the hay car, setting the hay on fire. So now this hay's on fire. There was a car filled with hay, which was food for the mules. So I'm going to underline that because that's probably important to my main idea. It's because we're talking about scorching heat, and now we have fire. What was on fire? The hay. Albert rushed to get a pail of water. Still, he probably didn't fear for his safety. Small fires could usually be put out easily. So this was something that they had seen happen regularly. But by the time Albert returned, it was clear that this fire was different. The smoke was already thick. He tossed his pail of water onto the flames. It did nothing. Worse, the hay car was stuck under the air shaft. The fresh air was fanning the flames. Albert needed to get out. And I bet so did everybody else. He and a few others rushed for the shaft to take a cage to the surface, but the cage operator stopped them. What? He said the fire would soon be out. And I guess he probably thought that since it happened regularly, because here small fires could usually be put out easily. But when he noticed that this was different, that's why he wanted to get out. He said the fire would soon be out. They should get back to work. Always worried about the money. But as the minutes passed, the fire got bigger and hotter. Soon the mine itself was on fire. Only then did the call go out to get people out of the mine. So the mine was on fire. Only then did the call go out. So once it was on fire, now is when they're like, okay, we need to get people out of here. So was it too late? That would be what I'm thinking. Was it too late to get people out? As Albert finally climbed into the cage, he called to a friend to warn others, including his brother Richard. Hundreds of men were spread throughout the tunnels. Hundreds of men. And here you have this fire. Are they going to be able to get everybody out? So that kind of goes with the too late. Was it too late to get everybody out, or should they had gotten out right when they noticed the fire was getting out of control? So now we're going to look at scorching heat, the main idea. Well, we have this fire, and then they're trying to get out. Okay? So we have a fire trying to get out. So I'm going to put that down here, that this was mostly about the fire. This is another thing that I can do when I'm trying to come up with the main idea. What is this section mostly about? This is about the fire. And then up here, they want to get out. Okay? So I'm going to put those two things together to come up with my main idea. These paragraphs were about getting out, and these paragraphs were about the fire, connecting it to the scorching heat. The scorching heat was the fire. So now let's put that into a sentence. We could say, The Cherry Mine fire quickly got out of control. And the miners weren't evacuated soon enough. Okay, and now what would be my supporting details? Well, there was a door for, okay, so the hay is what caught on fire. So Albert learned the hay car was on fire and it was hard to put out. So that would be one. And then my other one needs to go to, they weren't evacuated soon enough. So why weren't they evacuated soon enough? Well, the cage operator stopped them. The cage operator stopped the miners from evacuating. And that would support this main idea. Okay, so these two pieces of evidence came from the text to support my main idea, which was a sentence that I created. These two pieces of evidence came from the text to support this section, lonely and boring, and this is what I came up with for the main idea. So remember that your evidence has to come from the article that you read. Today you are going to finish reading the article and read Brutal Discussion and then read New Laws, and you're going to find the main idea and supporting details for each one.